Good evening, everyone. We begin with today's major breaking news from New York with that jaw-dropping number, $453,500,000. That is the amount Judge Arthur Engoron has ruled Donald Trump has to pony up in his New York civil fraud case, which includes nearly $100 million in interest. That number will continue to grow until he pays. And if that was not enough to ruin Trump's weekend plans, Engoron also ruled that Trump is barred from personally running a business in New York for the next 3 years. Yes, the man who built his whole brand around being a successful and wealthy businessman and real estate tycoon has been hit with an unimaginable fine. Engoron's ruling also hit the elder Trump sons, fining Eric Trump and Donald Trump $4 million apiece and fining Trump's longtime business manager, Allen Weisselberg, $1 million. Moments ago, New York Attorney General Letitia James reacted to the ruling.
Donald Trump may have authored the art of the deal, but he perfected the art of the steal. This long-running fraud was intentional, egregious, illegal. Today, we are holding Donald Trump accountable. We are holding him accountable for lying, cheating, and a lack of contrition, and for flouting the rules that all of us must play by.
If we're being honest, this ruling is not all that surprising, given that before the trial began in October, Engoron had already found Trump liable for fraudulently inflating the value of his properties to get better terms on loan and insurance applications. But nevertheless, that doesn't lessen the pain from the 1-2 punch where it hurts Trump the most, to his wallet and his ego. In his 92-page ruling, Judge Engoron used Trump's own claims against him in making this decision, writing, Donald Trump professed to know more about real estate than other people and to be more expert than anybody else. He repeatedly falsified business records with the intent to defraud. At one point in his ruling, Engoron referenced English poet Alexander Pope's, "To err is human, to forgive is divine." He then wrote, quote, defendants apparently are of a different mind. After some 4 years of investigation and litigation, the only error, inadvertent of course, that they acknowledge is the tripling of the size of the Trump Tower penthouse, which cannot be gainsaid. Their complete lack of contrition and remorse borders on pathological. The Trump Organization is calling this ruling a gross miscarriage of justice, and Donald Trump's legal spokeswoman and sometimes lawyer, Alina Habba, has already said they will appeal. Joining me now is Melissa Murray, law professor at New York University and MSNBC legal analyst. Tim O'Brien, senior executive editor at Bloomberg Opinion and MSNBC political analyst. And Tristan Snell, former assistant attorney general for New York and author of Taking Down Trump, 12 Rules for Prosecuting Donald Trump by Someone Who Did It Successfully. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to go right down the middle to you, Tim. You wrote a piece entitled Trump Loved New York, Now It's Giving Him the Boot. I'm going to read you to you. You write, the former president fashioned himself as a Gotham tycoon and longed to be accepted in its elite business circles. The rejection from that world may sting more than the severe financial penalties. Say more.
Well, you know, when we talk about the Trump legacy, we should remember that we're not talking about the Rockefellers or the Roosevelts, in either the business or political sense. It's sort of a pulp novel version of those families. But nonetheless, Trump spent decades fashioning this idea of himself as the consummate New York deal maker and entrepreneur. And he got into the world and got the attention he was able to glean from it largely on the shoulders of his father. It was Fred Trump's wealth that gave Trump this springboard into business and also insulated him from myriad mistakes he made for decades in his business career. And in the decades since, he's essentially taken a sledgehammer to the foundations of his own myth-making and the foundations of much of what Fred transferred to him in New York. He has a massive penalty that he's going to have to scramble to pay. And he's got on his sort of forehead now this mark of Cain. He has been exiled for 3 years from New York, and he can't do business in the state. And for someone whose identity was shaped as a New Yorker, particularly as a businessman, and the city is now turning to him, and the state is now turning to him and say, go somewhere else. We don't want you. it is a comeuppance that is going to sting for him, I think, for the rest of his days.
It is ironic that it is New York that is making him pay the price, Melissa. It is New York that is bringing him to heel. It is Letitia James. It's coming up, going to be Alvin Bragg, who's also got a case coming up. But it first started with E. Jean Carroll. E. Jean Carroll held Donald Trump to account for defaming her and for sexually assaulting her to the tune of $83.3 million, plus the $5 million she got the first time. So we're just going to put it up here. He now owes $453.5 million in this case, New York civil fraud case. He owes Ms. Carroll $83.3 million. Should we assume that he's ever going to pay that money himself? Or is he just going to make the RNC pay it once his daughter-in-law is in charge of the RNC? And is he going to have all those people buying $29 red hats, or I guess they're $46 or $45 plus tax? Are they going to end up paying this? Is he going to go to all the little people who are in his cult and make them pay it rather than him?
Well, it's a great question, Joy. When we interviewed Robbie Kaplan, who is the lawyer who represented E. Jean Carroll in that defamation case, we interviewed her on our podcast, Strict Scrutiny, and she was very clear that Donald Trump would be putting up a bond, that it had all been organized, and that E. Jean Carroll would be getting her money. And so, all of this is sort of fungible pots and money being moved around. I mean, I think a big aspect of the interest in campaigning, the interest in the RNC, is to free up certain kinds of money, certain lines of money to run the campaign so that his personal funds aren't able to be used for it. So, a lot of this is basically about managing the various pots of money that are accessible to the Trump family. But for sure, the fact that he has that bond will certainly be secured through the value of his properties, values that far exceed the amount of this judgment. So, I mean, it definitely can be covered by his holdings. That is something that's going to happen. He's going to be on the hook for this, especially if the appellate division of the New York courts actually affirm this judgment going forward. So I think we wait to see what happens with the appeal. But yes, certainly campaigning is going to be a way to funnel some cash into his campaign so that he does not privately fund it.
Right. But to your what you're saying, though, is he has to put up a bond if he wants to appeal, and he has to back that by property he owns.
Right.
Okay, well, at least he has to do that. Let me go to you, Tristan, because you do have the experience of having done this to him on Trump University. So, you know how Letitia James is feeling today about getting some accountability. There was an interesting part in this ruling in which on page, what is this? This is page 3, I believe, here. No, page 4. They make the point that timely repayment of loans does not extinguish the harm that false statements inflict on the marketplace. They're essentially saying we paid back the money doesn't do any good. And they put up these properties here: Seven Springs, 40 Wall Street, Mar-a-Lago, Trump International Golf Course, Trump National Golf Club, and Trump Park. All of these properties, he now has been adjudicated that he inflated their value. The fact that he paid his bills potentially for the mortgages on those properties, why did that not help him?
That's not what the law requires. This is not a commercial case between a bank and a fraudulent debtor. This was a case being brought by the people of the state of New York under a statute that is similar to statutes in all 50 states and on the federal books as well, that basically say you cannot have these frauds on the marketplace. You cannot just be able to lie and say whatever you want and get away with it. And we're not going to wait for some wronged party that may or may not have Stockholm Syndrome or the bank equivalent of Stockholm Syndrome to come forward. We're going to say that the people are going to sue to vindicate their rights. And that's what happened today.
You know what's interesting that you say that, and Tim O'Brien, I'm going to come back to you because you've also beaten Trump in court. I mean, this is like a panel of people who've beaten Trump in court here. We're waiting for Melissa's case as well. I mean, there is this thing where we learn in this, little ruling here about something a lot of Americans will never experience: private wealth management. The way that he was able to go around what normal people have to do when you want a mortgage, he had a private wealth manager. And also there was just his attitude. The ruling points out his behavior. Overall, Donald Trump rarely responded to questions he was asked. He frequently interjected long, irrelevant speeches on issues far beyond the scope of the trial. He refused to answer the questions directly or in some cases at all, severely compromised his credibility. Is what we're seeing in part here just the hubris of wealth? That wealthy people feel like I don't have to pay my bills, I don't have to tell the truth, I don't even have to go to the bank. I just go to my private wealth manager and they give me money because of my name.
Well, even within the world of extremely wealthy people, Donald Trump is in a class by himself. Most wealthy people are not this unhinged in a courtroom and haven't had the sort of decades of financial malfeasance and pushing the edges of civil society to get what he wants and the rule of law. And it finally caught up with him. And I think one thing really focusing on, in the ruling, when Engoron said that the defendants' disdain for the crimes they were charged with bordered on the pathological, I'm paraphrasing, but he certainly used the word pathologic. And all of Trump's antics in the courtroom and his lawyers' antics that were scoring them big points on the political trail that he sort of felt he was free to do, I think, and his lawyer, Alina Habba, who's now brought 2 massive financial penalties on her client's shoulders, attacked the judges in these free-for-alls in every case. And I think they thought they were just going to roll the courtroom. And I was surprised by the severity of the financial penalty in this case. I thought what Engoron was going to do was kick Trump out of New York and maybe shave this $370 million ask down to a much lower amount. And I think you can read into this document that he was sick of the way Trump conducted himself, and he wanted him to pay for it. In terms of the private bank, and I'll be brief, the remarkable thing about his private banker was the commercial real estate lenders at Deutsche Bank ended up getting burned by Donald Trump and refused to do business with him. And the private bankers in the same bank went ahead and did it. So it's not only that the wealthy can get around the corners the rest of us have to deal with, they can sometimes play people in the same bank off against one another to get loans they might not otherwise get.
Now to the parallel stories of a Russian patriot and an American idiot. The patriot, Alexei Navalny, the 47-year-old Russian political activist who led the most successful opposition campaign against Russian dictator Vladimir Putin for more than a decade, galvanizing primarily young Russians to stand up against their dictator, using social media and just plain bravery. So successful in exposing Putin's corruption that he was barred from running for president against Putin in 2018. In 2020, he was poisoned with a military nerve agent while on a business trip to Siberia, blaming the attempt on his life directly on Putin. After recuperating in Germany, he returned to Russia in 2021 and was immediately imprisoned and sentenced to a draconian 30-and-a-half-year sentence on a series of seemingly trumped-up charges. Navalny was eventually transferred to a Siberian gulag, where he was kept in a punishment cell. He was seen in court Thursday via video link from the penal colony, seeming to appear healthy. According to Russian authorities, today he fell sick and lost consciousness after a walk and died. And whether you believe that he died under the brutal conditions in that Arctic prison or that Vladimir Putin had him put to death, either way, the responsibility for his death lies at the feet of Putin, as Vice President Kamala Harris explained during a forceful speech in Munich, where she met on the sidelines with Navalny's now widow, Yulia.
We've all just received reports that Alexei Navalny has died in Russia. This is, of course, terrible news, which we are working to confirm. My prayers are with his family, including his wife, Yulia, who is with us today. And if confirmed, this would be a further sign of Putin's brutality. Whatever story they tell, let us be clear, Russia is responsible. And we will have more to say on this later.
Which brings us to the American idiot. According to Craig Unger, who interviewed a former KGB spy named Yuri Shvets for his book, American Kompromat, Our American Idiot, Donald John Trump, a third-rate real estate developer from Queens who was desperate to break into the big leagues in Manhattan and to be respected by the blue-heeled elites he so claims to despise, first appeared on the Soviet Union's radar in 1977 when he married his first wife, Ivana Zelnikova, a Czech model. and he allegedly became the target of a spying operation overseen by Czechoslovakia's intelligence service in cooperation with the KGB. 3 years later, he opened his first big property development in New York, the Grand Hyatt, buying 200 television sets from a Soviet emigre and KGB asset who co-owned an electronics shop on Fifth Avenue. The asset befriended Trump and got in the habit of flattering him. In 1987, Donald and Ivana visited Russia, pumped full of talking points that the operative reportedly fed him by stoking his ego and telling him he should go into politics. To understand how to exploit our American idiot, the Soviets studied his personality. The former KGB Major Shvets told The Guardian, for the KGB, it was a charm offensive. The feeling was that he was extremely vulnerable intellectually and psychologically, and he was prone to flattery. And flatter they did. Word started to spread that our American idiot might run for the Republican nomination for president in 1988. And shortly after he returned from Moscow, he took a full-page ad out in the New York Times declaring that there's nothing wrong with America's foreign policy that a little backbone can't cure. It took the form of an open letter to the American people on why America should stop paying to defend countries that can afford to defend themselves. The ad criticized Ronald Reagan's foreign policy and implied skepticism about U.S. participation in NATO. The night it first ran, he went on CNN and was asked about NATO.
There are many other countries and taking tremendous advantage of this, including NATO. If you look at the payments that we're making to NATO, they're totally disproportionate with everybody else's, and it's ridiculous.
Fast forward to 2016, that American idiot, Donald John Trump, actually became president, due almost entirely to his celebrity as a former reality TV star on NBC. And now, as an ex-president, having committed serial crimes before, during, and after his presidency, including fomenting an attempted coup to try to remain in office after losing his bid for re-election because of how incompetent he was as president, that Donald John Trump is still peddling those same pro-Russia talking points so perfectly aligned with the Kremlin. It's almost as if he was still receiving them from Moscow. Russia helped get Donald Trump elected in 2016, according to the Mueller report, by exploiting American social and racial divisions and amplifying them online, and by stealing Hillary Clinton's emails and exploiting the news media's voracious interest in them. And former KGB spy Vladimir Putin, who has been dictator of Russia in one way or another for nearly 25 years, is getting bolder and more blatant in his determination to subordinate the United States to him, to rebuild the Soviet Union by annexing Ukraine, which he lectured another American idiot, Tucker Carlson, belongs to Russia, and by openly jailing and killing his opposition with impunity, the latest victim being Alexei Navalny. While Trump leads one of our two major political parties, with his fellow Republicans parroting Russian talking points to the point where it's almost parody.
Whether you agree with it or not, Vladimir Putin believes that Russia has a historic claim to parts of western Ukraine. So our opinion would be to view it in that light as a sincere expression of what he thinks.
We're paying for a war, a proxy war with Russia, when I've never seen Putin actually show in any detail his plans to invade Europe. No one has shown me that. So I don't believe the lies that I'm being told about this.
Making people believe like Ukraine can win. No, Ukraine can't. Putin won't lose. Putin will not lose. He's not going to lose. You have to factor that into the reality if you're going to deal with this thing effectively to bring this war to an end.
Today, the Republicans' dear leader, Donald John Trump, had no response to the death of Alexei Navalny, as one would expect from someone so enthralled to Vladimir Putin. But President Biden did not mince words about Navalny's death or the Russian dictator's regime.